The 13th of October, 1917. That date was circled 3 months in advance, out loud, by 3 children too poor to read. Not a vague prophecy you could quietly forget, but a hard deadline, a named field in central Portugal, an announced hour near midday, a promise that all would see. Either the sky would obey a 10-year-old shepherd girl in front of 70,000 people, or the whole thing collapsed that afternoon. The roads filled with the faithful and the furious alike. Then the rain stopped, all at once. The thick gray clouds tore open like a curtain, and the sun broke through. Except it did not look like the sun anymore. Witnesses said they could stare straight into it without pain, a dull silver disk, turning on itself. Then it moved. It trembled, whirled, and threw off streaks of red and blue and violet and green across thousands of upturned faces. And then it seemed to fall. People screamed. Grown men dropped to their knees in the mud. Some shouted that the world was ending, others begged strangers for forgiveness out loud. The great burning disk appeared to plunge toward the earth in a zigzag, growing bigger and hotter, as if it meant to crush everyone standing there. 10 minutes, that is how long they said it lasted. And then, nothing. The sun was back where it belonged, and the sky was ordinary again. When people finally looked around, they noticed something they could not explain. Their clothes, drenched by hours of rain, were bone dry. The mud under their feet had firmed up. Tens of thousands of witnesses, and no explanation everyone could agree on, not then, and not in the 100 years since. But to understand how all those people ended up in one field on one foretold day, you have to go back a few months, to 3 kids and a flock of sheep. Spring of 1917. A quiet village called Fatima, in the poor hills of central Portugal. 3 shepherd children are watching their family's sheep on a scrubby patch of ground called the Cova de Iria. Lucia dos Santos, 10 years old. Her cousins Francisco and Jacinta Marto, 9 and 7. Ordinary kids from a deeply Catholic farming region. On the 13th of May, they said, a woman appeared above a small oak tree, a lady brighter than the sun, they told their parents. The children said the lady told them to come back to that same spot on the 13th of every month. And she made a promise that would change everything. In October, she would tell them who she was, and she would perform a miracle so that all may believe. That request, a miracle so that all may believe, had come from little Lucia herself, back on the 13th of July. She wanted proof. And soon, so did the whole country. At first, almost nobody believed them. Lucia's own mother thought she was lying and tried to force her to take it all back. The local priest suspected the whole thing came from the devil. Yes, this was a poor Catholic country, but it was also 1917, and Portugal was run by a fiercely anti-religious government with zero patience for peasant children seeing visions in a field. Officials looked at the growing story and saw a problem. And they decided to act. In August, the regional administrator, a man determined to expose the fraud, had the 3 children arrested and locked away. He threatened to boil them in oil if they didn't admit they'd invented the whole thing. 3 kids, aged 7 to 10, held by a hostile government, and not one of them changed the story. They came home. And they went right back to that field on the 13th. But the story only gets stranger from here. Word spread the way it always does, one neighbor telling another. Every 13th of the month, more people showed up at the cova to watch these children kneel and speak to something no adult could see. In May, a handful. By July, a few thousand. By September, tens of thousands were crowding the hillside, and some there reported a strange luminous globe and a shower of what looked like white petals drifting down. The children, meanwhile, only ever saw the lady. But here is the detail that turned curiosity into a national event. The children had announced the exact date the miracle would happen, the 13th of October, and even roughly the hour, around midday. 3 months in advance. A public prediction, with a hard deadline. This was not a vague prophecy you could quietly forget. Either something would happen in that field, on that day, in front of everyone, or 3 children would be exposed as liars for the entire country to see, and the press smelled blood. Portugal's newspapers, most of them secular and openly hostile to the church, pounced on the story. They mocked it. They ran cartoons. They practically dared people to show up and watch nothing happen, so the whole superstitious circus could finally be laughed off the front page for good. The stage was set for a public humiliation. The only question left was whose humiliation it was going to be. In the days before the 13th, the roads into Fatima filled up. People walked for miles, some of them barefoot, from all across the country. Farmers abandoned their fields. Families carried the sick and the crippled, hoping. Believers came to pray. Skeptics came to gloat. Reporters came with notebooks, ready to write the obituary of the whole affair. By the morning of the 13th, somewhere around 70,000 people were packed into that one muddy valley. And the weather could not have been worse. It was pouring. Cold, relentless rain had turned the cova into a swamp. 70,000 people stood ankle-deep in mud, umbrellas useless, clothes soaked straight through, staring at a sky so thick with cloud you could not even find the sun in it. For the doubters, this was perfect. What miracle happens in weather like this? And then, right on cue, the children arrived. Around midday, Lucia suddenly called out to the crowd to put down their umbrellas. Nobody quite knows why she said it, the rain was still coming down hard. But people obeyed her anyway. And then Lucia cried out, staring at something the crowd could not see, and flung her arm up toward the sky. "Look at the sun," she shouted. And 70,000 heads tilted up into the falling rain at the exact same instant. And the rain stopped. The clouds pulled back from the sun like a wound opening in the sky. What people saw next, they would spend the rest of their lives trying to describe. The sun had become a flat, spinning disk, silvery, soft enough to look at directly without flinching. It rotated on itself, faster and faster, hurling ribbons of colored light out across the field, across the crowd, across the trees and the far hills. Then it broke loose. The disk seemed to tear away from its place in the sky and plunge straight toward the earth, still spinning, in a wild zigzag. 70,000 people felt heat pouring down on them, felt the ground itself rushing up. This was the exact moment the whole country had been warned about, and it was worse and stranger than anyone had imagined. In that instant, people believed they were about to die. And they reacted the way you would expect. The valley erupted. People screamed, sobbed, threw themselves face down in the mud. Strangers confessed their sins out loud to no one in particular. Some prayed, some fainted, some just stood frozen, mouths open, watching the sun come down for them. And then, as suddenly as it began, the disk steadied, climbed back up the sky, and settled into place, an ordinary, blinding October sun, exactly where it should be. 10 minutes, and it was over. In the strange silence that followed, people started noticing things. Their clothes, drenched by hours of hard rain, were completely dry. Warm, even. The soaked mud had firmed up under their feet. Tens of thousands of people, suddenly dry, standing in a field that had been a swamp 10 minutes earlier. Some also reported the sick among them standing up healed. Believe that part or not, the drying of the clothes shows up again and again in the accounts. And it wasn't only the 70,000 people inside the cova. Reports came in from people miles away, up to 40 kilometers off, by some accounts, who said they too saw the sun behave strangely that afternoon. People with no idea that 3 children had promised anything at all. That is the part that still gives investigators trouble. Mass suggestion can move a crowd that came primed to see a miracle. It is much harder to explain a farmer 20 miles away who expected absolutely nothing. Over the years, plenty of explanations have been offered. Staring at the sunburns after images onto your retinas. Ice crystals or dust in the upper air can bend sunlight into rings of color. The mind of an expectant crowd happily fills in the rest. All of that is reasonable. And none of it fully covers a date announced 3 months in advance, tens of thousands of dry clothes, and witnesses too far away to catch the crowd's mood. The church studied the whole thing for 13 years. In 1930, it declared the events worthy of belief. But the line I keep coming back to isn't from any bishop. Remember the man I told you to keep in mind, the one who came only to laugh? His name was Avelino de Almeida, chief editor of O Seculo, the biggest anti-Catholic newspaper in the country. He came to mock. Instead, the next morning, he printed what he had seen with his own eyes, the sun trembling, dancing, and thousands falling to their knees. The one writer everyone trusted to demolish the story ended up testifying for it. And to this day, nobody can tell you why. So the last question is only yours to answer, what would you have written? That's the story. If you'd watch one more like this, hit subscribe and I'll have another ready soon.